Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie, for setting us up this morning, and for all the legislators taking the time out of your busy schedules to set the stage, and obviously supporting the wonderful legislation that I think is going to have wonderful effects through the state and also the agency partners. So my name is Joseph Amsili. I'm an extension associate with the New York Soil Health Program. It's really lovely to see all of so many people attending this, and a lot of wonderful friends and colleagues that support this work. Right now, we're going to be hearing from our Cornell Soil Health Team on a research and outreach update. And you'll be hearing from myself, followed by Debbie, Harold, and Matt, and then we'll take a short break. Just want to remind folks again, remember to put your questions in the Q&A so none of your wonderful questions are unanswered. So with that, I'm going to get started, and we're going to focus on what we've learned and what we've done in 2022. So just some brief background about the comprehensive assessment of soil health. The Soil Health Laboratory was launched in 2006 and captures all important soil processes, biological, physical, and chemical, and is really important because standard soil testing misses those really important physical and biological functions. So the test has evolved a lot since its inception and is even still evolving today. Bob Schindelbeck, the director of the Soil Health Lab, has done some wonderful work in the last year to add soil organic carbon and some additional nutrients that weren't available before, but basically focuses on practical soil testing services and provides interpretations, which is really the new part of these biological and physical measures. So provides some interpretation based on soil type, and then provides constraints which can guide management. So in this particular report, we see that aggregate stability is very low and indicates constraint for soil aeration, infiltration of water, rooting, crusting and sealing, erosion, and runoff. So the lab is extremely busy and is processing research, applied research, on-farm research, and outreach samples. So we've been doing a lot of work to understand soil health in New York State in the last 4 and 5 years. A couple of years ago, we released our first statewide characterization report of soil health across New York State, looking at the soil health status on different soil types, regions, and cropping systems. And then more recently, we did a specific regional analysis where we had enough samples to look at the unique soils of Long Island and cropping systems and how they were shaping soil health. So this work is really giving us a powerful foundation to interpret soil health, specifically for New York on our soil types and our cropping systems. So recently we've started to think about 3 factors driving soil health, and I think they're 3 important lenses that can help us understand the controls on soil health. At the fundamental level, we have inherent properties, which are shaped by a location's unique combination of parent materials or minerals, climate, biology, relief, and time, and those shape the local soils over time. On a second level, we can think of a cropping system control. And this is the different types of cropping systems we have across the landscape. In New York State, we have a great diversity of cropping systems across the landscape. We have annual grain, we have dairy, orchards, vineyards, small and big vegetable operations. And those also influence the total amount of inputs and different types of disturbance that can happen. But this maybe is slightly limited control, because if we're doing annual grains, we know that we're going to have we're using the soil harder than a pasture, so we're going to have potentially, they're not apples, we can't compare them directly. And then management is the third and final factor, and that's something that farmers control, the amount of organic matter inputs they apply, cover crops, crop yield, and things like tillage, which all influence soil health. So these three levels, I think, are really important as we think about the factors that control soil health. So the inherent properties, soil type, these are shaped by a location's unique combination of soil forming factors. And we're going to look at some of the effects of inherent soil properties, namely soil texture on soil health. So first, we've known for a long time that available water capacity, the amount of plant available water that a soil can hold on, is shaped by soil texture. So here you see that our intermediate textures, silt loam especially, is inherently able to store the most amount of plant available water. So we really need this background information to be able to interpret the effects of management, because there's an underlying really strong effect of texture here. Additionally, soil texture shapes a soil's ability to hold on to organic matter, reactive organic carbon, and controls how biologically active they can be. So from this research, we were able to see very clearly that finer textured soils store more soil organic matter, active carbon, and are more biologically reactive than active than the coarser textured soils. So that information is really critical to interpret soil health by this soil property. For example, 3.7 would be really good for a sandier textured soil, but for a silt loam soil, that's about average. So interpreting soil health data, the Cornell Soil Health Lab provides a really wonderful report card that interprets these different physical, biological, and chemical measurements based on that soil texture group, which, as I showed before, controls the amount of plant available water and organic matter that a soil can hold. So it gives you the raw values and then helps you interpret those raw values based on the soil texture. And then if the ratings are below 20, it flags a constraint. Here again, we have aggregate stability being that constraining soil property. So this soil is not really resilient to those intense rainfall events. And with all the samples that have been going through the Cornell Soil Health Lab, we've also been taking the leadership role at the national level to help with interpretation tools for different soil health indicators. So this is one of those new interpretation tools, SHAPE, the Soil Health Assessment Protocol for Evaluation, which reflects kind of a merging of different interpretation frameworks to be able to basically interpret a soil sample from anywhere in the country. And it uses not only texture, but a soil's taxonomy or classification, and also mean annual temperature and precipitation. So here it's showing that a soil organic carbon value of 2 is about average for this mollisol in Iowa. So onto the soil health factors that cropping systems and biomass cycling. These are the human factors that shape soil health. And we can really think of two extremes. On the one hand, we can have pasture cropping systems, and basically all of that biomass that's produced on site is returned and cycled on site, and we have no disturbance through tillage. And on the other hand, we can have annual cash crop production, where potentially 50 to 80% of that biomass that's produced at that site is harvested and exported, and we can also have different losses from tillage. And the traditional situation is that the nutrients are replaced, but that carbon that replenishes soil health is not replaced. So in that characterization of soil health across New York State report, we looked at the effects of cropping system on soil health. And we looked at 5 different cropping systems: annual grain, dairy cropping, pasture, mixed vegetable, and processing vegetable, which are basically the larger vegetable operations. And we basically found the highest soil health levels under the cropping systems that had the most carbon inputs and that had the least disturbance. So we're really excited to be by the New York Soil Health and Climate Resiliency Act, and especially the call to work on establishing appropriate voluntary standards and objectives for soil health. And if you're interested in this topic, please join the breakout roundtable discussion group on this topic. So we've been working on this concept of setting production environment soil health goals, which are basically setting a goal based on a specific soil type and cropping system. So here, as an example, we have New York, loam textured soils, and annual grain cropping systems, and that's our population. And we are proposing that goals could be set based on the 75th percentile or 90th percentile for these specific production environment populations. So here's an example of that for loam textured soils and these 6 cropping systems: annual grain, processing vegetable, dairy cropping, mixed veg, orchard, and pasture. And also recently, with that Long Island characterization, we were able to do a really cool comparison of looking at whether whether regional soil health goals need to be established. And especially for Long Island, it turned out that Long Island soils are not able to achieve, within the same texture and cropping system, don't seem to be able to achieve the same soil health levels, soil organic matter, soil organic carbon, than the same ones from other parts of New York State. And an important explanation is potentially those coarser textured soils. It's a little bit warmer on Long Island, might explain this. So this argues for a regional voluntary standards, especially for Long Island. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Debbie.
Thank you, Joseph. Morning, everyone. I'm Debbie Aller. I'm also an extension associate at Cornell University and with the Soil Health Initiative. And I'm really excited to be here today and to talk about some of our extension and outreach activities that we've been doing over the past couple of years and particularly focused on this year. So as part of the New York Soil Health Initiative is really critical to disseminate research, many of which Joseph had just showed, and share new technologies and practices and other information with stakeholders, including farmers, technical service providers, consultants, policymakers, and many others interested in soil health, excuse me. So extension and outreach is a critical component of our work. One way we're communicating the results of the comprehensive assessment of soil health tests, which Joseph just shared, is through benchmarking, or what we're calling soil health benchmarking. And this allows farmers to have baseline values and monitor changes in some of these soil health indicators or their overall soil health scores within a given field or between fields, as well as compare these to other fields with similar soil types or cropping systems. And it allows farmers to visualize the impacts of a given practice on a soil health indicator. So in this example, in the middle, you can see the soil health indicator value for a cover crop field versus a no cover crop field. As part of the Soil Health Initiative, we maintain leadership and coordinate the New York Soil Health Alliance, which is formerly the New York Soil Health Working Group. And this is a network of soil health professionals from across the state. And it's been critical to the coordination and collaboration of soil health activities by our many partner organizations who are part of the summit today. So we can collaborate and coordinate our activities and not duplicate our efforts, but maximize our impacts. And at the bottom of the slide, you can see the logos of many of our partners. This year, we've worked with many of these partners, organizations, and individuals to organize a series of 9 field days across the state. All of these field days were focused around soil health and climate resiliency. They were held in both urban and rural parts of the state on farms and focused on numerous different commodities, including field crops, vegetables, orchards, vineyards, and we were able to reach almost 600 folks through these field days. We're really thankful for all our farmers, speakers, and others who helped to make these incredibly successful, and we look forward to collaborating in next year and beyond on other field days. Here are just a few pictures from these field days in New York City, in Western New York, in Northern New York, some of the crops and some of the topics we discussed, like reduced tillage and cover crops. This year, we also launched the New York Soil Health Project and travel mini grants, which were really small pockets of funding, which were helped to facilitate soil health activities and learning opportunities for organizations that potentially have limited funding or where this could help facilitate greater soil health education. There was tremendous interest in these grants, and we were really only able to fund a small number of the projects, but these projects were able to impact more youth groups, underserved individuals in both urban and rural farming communities across the state. And we're really hoping to offer these mini grants again in 2023 and beyond, just because of the incredible interest in these small pockets of funding. Again, just showing some pictures of the incredible impact that small amounts of funding can have in communities in allowing marginalized or underrepresented communities able to travel to learn about soil and the importance of it within their communities, and also getting youths interested in soil health activities. Last year, about this time in 2021, we offered the first advanced soil health training to an international audience of over 200 individuals. And with some slight changes, we'll be holding this course again at the end of the winter in the first half of 2023. Registration will be coming soon. And we've also previously held some soil health trainings for agricultural educators, consultants, and many others within New York State. And in the future, we're really hoping to offer more focused, specialized trainings within the urban agriculture, just because of the profound interest in that area right now, as well as our perennial cropping systems, our orchards and vineyards, and other crops as well. Collaborating on with other researchers and extension professionals across the state that have many different areas of expertise has been a critical part of the success of the New York Soil Health Initiative. And we are working to expand our understanding of soil health within orchards and vineyards, recognizing that soils within these perennial systems are different than annual cropping systems. And also working to support our colleagues within the urban agricultural space, as well as increasing education and awareness around new technologies or newer technologies for many folks in biochar. Increasing our or educating, increasing awareness and understanding of what biochar is, how it is produced, where it can be used, some basics about it, because it's not a new technology, but it's a newer technology for many policymakers, many farmers, many extension educators, technical service providers, and consultants. So we are actively working within this space to produce extension and outreach materials, as well as lead webinars educating folks in biochar. And finally, with the biochar space, we've been working to create a soil suitability analysis to help highlight where biochar can have the greatest potential for a positive impact on crop yields within croplands across New York State, so we can identify the suitable areas of cropland where biochar could potentially have the greatest positive impact on yield, and thus providing the greatest return to our farmers. Lastly, I just want to mention the development of some handbooks and learning materials that we utilize or have been produced to help communicate the importance of soil health. Earlier this year, the 4th edition of the Building Soils for Better Crops book was published, with which Dr. Van Ness is one of the lead authors on this book, and that has really been an incredible resource for students, extension educators, and many others to learn about soil health and sustainable soil management. Many of you participating in the summit today have seen this cover crop poster, but this poster and other similar resources have just been incredible visuals to help communicate the importance of practices like utilizing cover crops, but really emphasizing what's happening below the ground and the importance of roots and the role they play in building healthy soil, rather than just always thinking about what's happening above the ground. Lastly, I would really officially like to launch our new policy brief series, which we're really excited about. And this is just perfect timing with some of the policy considerations that Donna Lepardo and our other legislators had mentioned earlier this morning around the importance of soil health and policy. And so these policy briefs will be released quarterly, starting hopefully in the next couple of days. We'll be releasing the first brief, and these are going to be very short summaries of our research aimed at non-technical audiences and policymakers that will present some key points to consider for making policy decisions. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Van Ness. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, and welcome again. This time I turned my video on, so I hope you can see me. So I'm going to be continuing on with a few snippets of some information on what insights we gained on soil health, especially with the benefits that we have, and somewhat uniquely of our Cornell University Soil Health Laboratory, which we launched over 15 years ago, and we now have this wonderful database. So one of the conclusions, and I'm just showing you one example here, is that the forms of labile carbon and nitrogen and the indicators that represent that, like protein, active carbon, respiration, etc., that they appear to be a more representative of soil health and yield potential than the other indicators. So this is actually a long-term tillage study, and I've ranked the indicators on each of the graphs, and you can see that protein, active carbon, manganese, and respiration have much higher correlations with average yield than total organic matter. So it seems like the biologically active component of organic matter is particularly relevant and important, and so it's good that we have that included in our soil health test. We're also looking at the soil microbiome, working with the colleagues Dan Buckley and Rolly Wilhelm. And so this is using the latest technology, the DNA sequencing, and trying to get some insights in the microbial communities and how they are influenced by different aspects of soil health management with the plant associations, or say disturbance by tillage, or overall soil health. And so this is still early work, but we're gaining some insights into these kind of processes and how the DNA sequenced information relates to the more traditional soil health testing information. We are also interested in looking more at the spatial processes and using machine learning and advanced data analytics to get greater insights into where we have greater soil health or less. And so for now, as an initial attempt, and this is part of one of my PhD students, Valentina Rubio, we focused on the Lake Plain and the Allegheny Plateau and Catskill area. And so using these kind of machine learning techniques, we can look at patterns. For example, we see an overall increase in soil health as we see more pastures in a landscape or a cropping system. And processing vegetables are challenging for the reasons that Joseph talked about, because there's typically not that much biomass cycling, and there's a lot of disturbance. So the sort of the basic ingredients of maintaining soil health are not well represented. Now, one of the motivations around this is because we have a very interesting mosaic here in New York around different cropping systems. So we have dairies, we have processing vegetables, we have orchards, etc. And they have different qualities in terms of how much carbon and nutrients are being cycled. And we have farms that generally have surpluses, like dairy farms, and they're farms that have generally deficits. And so can we better allocate those basic ingredients of soil health by maybe transferring some of the carbon and nutrients, or maybe land sharing and things like that? And some of that is already going on, but we want to do a spatial assessment of that. Going back to the Soil Health and Climate Resiliency Act, there's two other aspects, and they were mentioned before. One is better understanding the potential for carbon sequestration and how that relates to soil health, and another focuses on nutrients and to achieve reductions in nitrous oxide losses. So we've done some work on that. This is actually Joseph's part of Joseph's PhD research, where we've gone to some long-term experiments that were started over 25 years ago, where we have different tillage systems, notably no-till and plow-till. I'm showing some data here from the Willsboro farm in the northeastern part of the state, where we had initially had soil that was used for hay ground, or the sod benchmark here, where we see really quite high organic carbon levels, a very healthy soil situation. And then when this soil was put into annual crop production, in this case corn silage, we see that a dramatic reduction in carbon. But we also see that in general, the no-till has higher carbon levels in the top layer. But when we go deeper into the soil, we see that the plow-till actually has more carbon. So overall, under a corn silage system, we don't necessarily see a carbon benefit of a no-till. So this is something that we really need to look into a little bit more and get some good quantitative information on what the benefits are in terms of carbon from different soil management systems. A few other things that we're interested in doing in the near future. One is I mentioned corn silage, and we've seen some concerns around no-till corn silage. Many of the dairy farmers have increased their corn silage acres relative to their perennial sod acres, and we're starting to see some concerns around compaction, problems with manure injection, etc., and even cover crop establishment. And this became an issue on the other side of Lake Champlain, right in Vermont, where it ended up in court, and the judge actually ruled against the farm. And so we need to help our dairy farmers kind of deal and make them understand and try to find solutions around no-till and continuous corn silage. We're also interested in more flexible soil management tools like strip till. And then we are kind of excited about looking into the potential for using New York's cold season, New York's winters, to improve soil health and reduce nutrient and greenhouse gas losses. And so one of the interesting things is that, when we have cold temperatures in the air, in the soil, we virtually have no losses of greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, because the biological activity of the soil is very, very low. And so the question is, can we take advantage of those conditions, especially particular windows of opportunity where, even though our soils are often quite wet in the winter, when they freeze up, they actually become quite dry, and we have opportunities, for example, for manure application, which is you see here being done on Table Rock Farm in Western New York. So we want to research that further. We're also, and I don't have it on the slide, we're participating in a larger project related to soil health on solar farms because of the very rapid adoption there. Then also on the issue of nutrients, that is also mentioned in the legislation. So one of the developments is that if we are starting to look at more multi-objective cropping environments, where it's not only about producing food, but also increasing soil health, carbon storage, water quality, and reducing energy consumption, we now have these much more diverse cropping environments where we have more advanced rotations, new tillage systems, cover cropping, of course, new technologies around crops and fertilizers, and hopefully more diverse organic input in the circular economy. And so all of these practices then also interact with the soil condition and especially with the weather. So, and Jennifer Clifford mentioned the interest in digital tools What we have available and we've worked on actually through the initial support of Maurice Hinty, our congressman from a couple of decades ago, was the development of model-based tools that account for soil and crop management and integrates that with high-resolution weather data to generate more precise and more field-specific recommendations. We're now combining that in a research project with in-field sensing using robots that can go between rows and sense the nitrogen stress. And the objective there is to really optimize the nitrogen application. And nitrogen and nitrous oxide is a very significant source of greenhouse and energy concerns. So being able to address that is one of the objectives. So the summary points for at least for our 3 presentations, and Matt Ryan is still following, is listed here. And I think I'm going to hand it over to Matt right away because we're running a little bit late on time.
All right, thanks, Harold. It's yeah, pleasure to be here with everyone. I'm looking for my slides. I think they will show up in a second here, but great presentation so far. It's yeah, really nice to be here with everyone. So I'm Matt Ryan. I'm an associate professor, also co-lead of the Soil Health Initiative here at Cornell University. So yeah, so I'll be talking a little bit more about some of the research that we're doing, particularly related to management practices, as Joseph was talking about. And that's where we see an opportunity with farmers to really have an impact on soil health. So in the Sustainable Cropping Systems Lab, the lab that I lead at Cornell, we look at different practices. We look at overcoming barriers to adoption of conservation practices, such as cover crop interseeding, diversifying cropping systems with different crops, including perennial grains, such as kernza, as you can see in that middle photograph, and then also using cover crops to facilitate reducing tillage and no-till. And that's what you're looking at on that photograph on the right. And that's really what I want to focus on today. So I'll see if I can advance these slides here. We'll get started here. So for people who are not familiar with this rolled cover crop system, what we're trying to do here is grow a cover crop and then use the mulch to protect the soil and to improve soil health. And so that mulch, it provides a number of different benefits, reduces soil erosion, and it also suppresses weeds. And so this is a strategy that is used by organic farmers to use no-till. So organic farmers often rely on tillage for weed control because they're not using herbicides. And so this is an opportunity for them to get away from that tillage and cultivation that they're using and instead use that cover crop mulch to suppress weeds. And we've had very good success with no-till planting soybean into rolled cereal rye. And so some of our previous research has shown that there are a number of different benefits of using this approach. We can reduce labor. We can reduce the amount of hours that farmers need to spend in the field managing weeds, for example. We can reduce diesel fuel. But we can also see some savings in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and reducing energy use. By using a cover crop like this and laying it on the soil surface, not tilling it in, but growing a large, high biomass cover crop, we can really see some improvement in soil health. We can increase water infiltration and protect soil from erosion. Now, this last point, I think, is really important. Here you can see some on-farm research where and this is on pretty flat ground, where we had a washout shortly after soybean planting. And in side-by-side plots, we often see some erosion where we're using our basically tillage, and then very clean fields and plots without erosion where we're rolling down our cover crop and no-till planting soybean. And again, this is particularly important for farmers in New York State and in the Northeast, where we've seen a dramatic increase in the frequency of heavy rainfall events since the 1950s. So we're getting more rain that's coming down all at once in the Northeast. So we really need to be protecting our soils, and this is a great way to do it. I'm focused on, in these slides, on organic cropping systems, but all of this that I'm talking about is completely relevant and transferable to non-organic to conventional cropping systems. And we're seeing some non-organic farmers pick this up and really run with it in terms of planting green, growing these high biomass cover crops and protecting their soil, building soil health that way. So completely transferable here. Our research was recently published in this guide, Organic No-Till Planted Soybean Production. This is available for free online, and you can go and download this from the New York Soil Health website. It includes a lot of our research findings, our recommendations to date about how to make this system work. And it also includes several farmer features where we went and worked with farmers to implement this system, and we really try to integrate their experiences, good and bad, into the guide here. So trying to really tell you what to look out for, how best to approach this if you're interested in doing it. So it's been really interesting working on this. In terms of organic production, sometimes we're not able to achieve that level of weed suppression that we're really looking for. So one thing that we've been working on with the New York Soil Health Initiative is looking at some additional tools for non-chemical weed management to help organic farmers in particular manage any weeds that might break through that mulch. In many cases, again, when we're growing enough biomass, we have very good weed suppression. Occasionally, we do have some weed escapes. And so we're looking at some new tools here. On the left, you're looking at an inter-row mower, and this is basically a new machine that mows in between rows of soybean or other crops. And then this has been very effective, and we're really excited about it. We actually have a new project now that's funded by the USDA that involves collaboration with researchers in Wisconsin, in Vermont, and in Maine, where we all will be using this inter-row mower. Another tool that we're looking at is the weed zapper. This is electrocution weed management. We're basically have a boom that goes above the crop canopy, and any weeds that emerge and grow above the crop canopy can be killed with electricity. And you can see here the generator on the back and then that copper boom on the front here. So this has also been quite effective. Again, these tools are also being used by non-organic farmers for managing herbicide-resistant weeds. So really exciting technological developments here with these new tools. Looking forward to seeing that and where that goes. So the past research, again, has really been focused on organic no-till corn, or organic no-till soybean, excuse me, that's been no-till planted into rolled crimp cereal rye. There's also been quite a bit of work done with no-till planting corn into rolled crimp hairy vetch, and you can see that on the right. It's a different type of residue, but traditionally these have been the two crops that have been used for this rolled cover crop system. And so what we've been looking at in our system is one, trying to optimize the soybean system and trying to make some advances and increase the consistency with the corn. But we're also looking at a number of other crops that can use this same approach of rolling down a cover crop, mechanically killing that cover crop, and then using it as surface mulch to facilitate reductions in tillage and no-till planting. What you're looking at here is a field experiment from one of my graduate students, Udi Manalid. This is one block, one of four, that was at a field experiment in Aurora, New York. This is also replicated down in the Hudson Valley, and it was done for 2 years. And so what we've done here is we planted cover crops, and you can see going from top to bottom, we have a series of different cover crops. And we're really looking at these sequences, the compatibility between the cover crop and the cash crop. Notice that we weren't growing cereal rye before corn because of the nitrogen, the effects of nitrogen on that. We're growing hairy vetch before corn, and that's worked well, and cereal rye before soybean, and that has worked well. Well, here we've looked at a number of different cover crops, hairy vetch and cereal rye together, cereal rye, hairy vetch, winter canola, and then we had a tilled control on the right there. And then in this factorial experiment, we grew a number of different cash crops, so sweet corn, dry beans, so black beans, soybean, corn, and then sunflower. And so you can just see how the in this aerial photo, the success of and some of the failures here with the different combinations of cash crops and cover crops. And so Udi Manalid has done a great job. One of the things that we're seeing here in his research is that sunflowers can be no-till planted into these cover crop mulches. They work much better in actually hairy vetch than in cereal rye. Here, there's a nitrogen deficit that you need to overcome with that cereal rye, but at a series of field days this summer where Udi was telling participants about his research and talking about some of the potential for using cover crops to facilitate no-till production here. Another thing that we're looking at is drilling, no-till drilling, winter wheat into summer cover crops. Previously, we were looking at winter cover crops, so hairy vetch and cereal rye, and then no-till planting summer cash crops. Here we're flipping it around. We're trying to grow our summer cover crops and then no-till planting our winter cash crops. We've had great success with this, particularly with no-till planting wheat into buckwheat, which is not shown here. What we're doing in this photograph is rolling down sorghum Sudan grass and no-till planting wheat into that. That worked well for weed suppression, but yields took a hit. And so buckwheat looks like a good option for that strategy there. And then another project that we just started this past year, along with Kristen Loria, who's an extension support specialist, who's working with me as part of the New York Soil Health Initiative, doing some on-farm research looking at winter-killed cover crops for no-till planting spring wheat. So really trying to protect that soil and use this same approach, but instead of using a roller crimper, letting cold temperatures terminate those cover crops so that we can go in without tillage and get our spring wheat planted. So some exciting advances here with using cover crops to facilitate no-till. Again, we're trying to increase resilience to climate change by improving soil health, increasing water infiltration, protecting that soil from erosion. We're developing management guidelines for integrating no-till and using cover crops to facilitate that the ability to no-till plant your cash crops. And so far, we've seen consistent success with soybean and some very promising preliminary results with no-till corn into rolled crimped hairy vetch, and also sunflower and wheat, no-till planting those into cover crops as well. So that's all I have. I'll be leading a roundtable discussion in the afternoon that's focused on looking at some challenges and opportunities with organic crop production. So thanks, everyone.